Hello, and welcome to our quarterly Trust Fundraising Hub live Q&A on Facebook, LinkedIn through our Money Tree fundraising page, and on X, formerly Twitter, at #TrustFundraise. I'm Deanna Wolf, the Senior Consultant for Trust Fundraising here at Money Tree Fundraising, and your host. I've been a trust fundraiser for a little over 20 years now at a broad range of charities and universities. We've had some questions submitted to us. However, if you have a question, please put it in the comment box below and I'll make sure I answer it. Before we start, I did want to tell you that our next Q&A live is on Thursday, the 15th of February and at 12:15. And I want to let you know also about our next training webinar, which will be next Tuesday, the 21st of November at 12:30. It is called Beyond the Roadmap, Developing Successful Trust Fundraising Strategies. It's aimed at trust fundraisers and other fundraisers who have to develop a strategy. The tickets are available through the Money Tree Fundraising website if you're interested. Now, one of our questions was about what is the funding amount which would be considered successful or a good result for a single individual fundraiser. And this is a performance indicator to find out whether you are meeting your targets and you're doing a good job. It can be tricky. I wouldn't necessarily put an amount on it that a fundraiser has to raise £250,000 or £50,000 or £500,000, and that's the mark of a good fundraiser. It can depend an awful lot on getting a single grant in that your organization may never get again. And so that is not always the best indicator for trust fundraising and whether a trust fundraiser is doing a good job. It does depend on a number of factors, and not the least of which is being the maturity of your trust fundraising program, the length of time your organization has existed, and the type of work you do. And then you get to the fundraising landscape, which right now has competition being very stiff, and it's a very, very difficult landscape. The experience of the fundraiser, the willingness or ability of your organization to provide the information required by the trust fundraiser or required by the funder to your trust fundraiser, which it can be very, very difficult to get sometimes, and the amount of potential funding which exists for your specific type of work. There's no point putting a target of £250,000 on a fundraiser if the potential available income is only going to be £50,000 because there's a limited number of funders who fund in your area. And then it's also about what the full-time equivalent is for the trust fundraiser available. So it's going to be different for everyone. Are they part-time? Are they only working 1 day a week? Are they working 5 days a week? Are they working 30 hours? Are they working 37 and a half? It's going to depend on each individual charity. So instead of setting targets often based on the amount of funding secured, it may be better looking at the activity performance indicators. So the delivery of research, the administration, because it can be heavier for trusts and for other income streams, stewardship, and the number of applications being completed and submitted. All of this is relative to the time available for the fundraiser, the time it takes to generally complete that task. So there isn't, just to remind everyone, there, as you will all know, there isn't a book out there that has all the trusts in it that you can apply to and that you can just open it up and start applying. You have to do research to match your goals to the organization's goals. And that can take days and days and days to get a list of 35 or 40. We're regularly finding when we work with charities that it can take that long to get a small number of charities that are a really good, sometimes even more than a decent fit. It also depends on the number of applications being submitted. So that can be small ones. Small ones can take, once you set yourself up, it can take very little time to do. Larger ones can take upwards of several weeks, sometimes several months to complete. So it also depends on the opportunities that are available for you. And that's going to be different for every organization. So before you set an amount of money being the amount of money you're expecting someone to bring in, you do need to have an idea of what the workload is going to be and what the potential, not just the possible, but the probable of applying to certain trusts and what is out there. Now, Jenny Perez wanted to know about EU funding and where to start and any tips. And she put that application in this morning, or put that question in this morning. I don't do any EU funding. I think I've done reporting on it once in one organization myself. However, I did do a quick Google search and I found a good website through a portal. It's called, and if you're ready for this, I'll say it twice, https://ec.europa, EUROPA.eu, and I will also put this into the comments box, /info/funding-tenders/opportunities/portal/screen/home. And that has a listing of all the categories that you can then click through for to find out what they fund and how to apply. You're going to need to check if you, if you're a charity within the UK, if you are still eligible to apply for them. Some you are. However, a lot of the structural infrastructure grants from the EU that Britain used to get for roads, buildings, and some public services, after Brexit, they've been replaced by the UK government and are now being delivered through local government from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So if you're looking for those areas, you do need to go and double check with your local authority to see if that funding is available in your area or for the people that you're working with. People have also been asking about various funding portals. Oh. People have been asking, sorry, I was just double checking to see if there's any questions coming up. People have been asking about various portals for prospect research, such as where you post your proposal in one central spot and any of their funders can review it. Now, in one case, this was for the Ludlow Trust. In another case, it was for another organization called Brevia. But I'd like to point out there's two different kinds, and you have to make your decision as an organization which you think is the most appropriate for you to work through, if either or any are appropriate at all. Organizations like the Ludlow Trust is a central access point for the charities and trusts that it manages as the correspondent, as the person you would be applying to first, such as if you were applying through an accounting agency or a legal firm. It is sometimes the trustee for those trusts as well. So it has a vested interest in having that central port. It would be the same as if you're going to a legal firm and they list the organizations that they manage grants for and manage the grant and information process for. In which case they are employed by the charities to do that work and a significant amount of that work for them. The other kind is a service provided by a third party, which often has an income-based, which isn't derived from the subscriptions for it, the way a subscription service like Funds Online, Grants Online, Grin, and there's many others. But where they get their funding from is a commission or a fee from the organization giving the funding out, so the trust or foundation, the charities applying, or in fact, it's a top slice off of the grants which are awarded. And sometimes you have to pay to put your information on there. That latter type is often restricted to a particular geographic area, and it can have a reduced usage value, therefore, to grant-seeking charities unless you fit it exactly. The other thing is, really, it's only you putting the information up on the board. It requires those charities that they have persuaded to be part of their part of their business to constantly look. Now, sometimes that is government grant organizations and statutory organizations, local government, and they will put their grant opportunities there. It's worth having a look at them, But I think it's worth also taking a look and seeing what the ramifications, if you get the funding from them, are, because sometimes it's not very clear. We did get some questions as well through the question list that we put out last week, asking what's your trust question. One of them is about standardized emails to small trust fundraisers, and is that ever a good idea? To a certain extent, I would say yes, but to a certain extent, I would also say you need to tweak them and you need to tailor them to the individual funder. The same way you would send out a general proposal to a funder who, because your project, you're asking for a small amount of money, say it's a small grants application, it's a proposal rather than an application form that you're filling in. Your project is not changing. You may be asking for unrestricted funds. It's a very simple ask. It's a very simple procedure, and it's a very simple proposal you're putting in front of them. You can do that, but you still need to tailor it to the individual trust. Focus on the things they're talking about. If they fund 3 areas and you do 3 areas of work, generally focus on the one, and only one of their areas is links to you. Make sure you focus on that area and you really highlight it. So it's fine to have a template, but you do need to adjust it. You'll also need to adjust your cover letter appropriately and make sure that everything matches, and you don't do, as I'm sure many of us did early in our careers, and sometimes if we're not careful, which is why you need to triple check, read things through, that you sending an application to one funder and you put the wrong name into the application for another funder. It happens. It's happened, I'm sure, to many, many of us who've been doing this for a long time. And at that point, you start preparing much better, and you start reviewing your work much better. From that point of view, if you don't have anyone to review your work and you've read it over and over and over again, my suggestion is read it out loud. And from that reading out loud, you will be able to catch the things that you aren't catching through reading it silently. The next one that we had is, if you're writing a speculative letter, what information do they want to see the most, i.e. what carries the greatest impact? First of all, it's going to depend on the trust itself and what the area that what cause area you're working in. Some of it is going to be about the donation that they are going to make, but a lot of it is, if you're writing a speculative letter, they may not know you. So with the assumption that you've never applied to them before, they may not know you. You need to introduce your organization, or rather, you need to introduce your work. Trusts prefer to fund. Trusts are in business to fund the organization, not the organization, not the fundraiser. They're in business to fund, and their existence is to fund the beneficiaries and the work you're doing. It's not to fund you. And it seems like that's the same thing, but it's a slightly different issue. One is about you as an organization, and what do you bring to the table, as in, why are you the organization to fund? And really what you need to do is, why is the work that you're doing important? Why are the beneficiaries that you have the important ones to be considering, rather than you as an organization? And I'm sorry, it seems that there we go. I am in a room, and for once in Scotland, it's actually really quite bright. So I'm looking at myself and I can see myself sort of glowing, starting to glow. Yes, so it's about making sure you're funding and talking about your organization's work rather than your organization. If you're talking about how long you've been in business and how long you've existed, use that as to show that you are an expert at what you're doing, rather than, hi, look how great we are, we've been around for 70 years. It's more, hi, look at the great work we've been doing for 70 years and how we know that is useful and that has merit. The other thing that you might want to do is talk to them about why there is a need and why your need and what you are doing fits what they want to do. So you need to tie that link really, really closely. Don't make them do any work. As we've been saying for months and coming up on on more than 3 years now, since the COVID pandemic. Don't make the funder do the work. You do the work for them. Explain why they need to be a funder of yours, and how if they work with you and through you, they will accomplish their goals, and they will help you accomplish the goals you have for your beneficiaries, or that your beneficiaries have. Making sure that those things are clear will really help. So if you clearly indicate what your the current reality is, and where the future ideal is, and how you can get there, it will make things a lot clearer. Also, make sure when you're doing it that your ask is really clearly linked to how much they actually give. Don't ask them for £10,000 if they only ever give out £10,000 in total, and they're giving them out in grants or awards of £500 to £1,000. You're not going to get it. They may say you're being completely unreasonable and you haven't done your research. We just had one question come up of, how do funders that don't accept unsolicited applications work, and what can your organization do to help to be seen? Oh, we had that one already in our list. One of those things is, find out if they don't accept unsolicited applications. Find out if they also say, any that we receive, we throw in the bin. Because some will say that, and some will say no unsolicited applications will be considered. If they give you contact details, and those contact details are a matter of public availability or public knowledge, what I would do is contact them and say, this is the kind of thing we do, whether that's by phone, or whether that's by email, or whether that's by letter. Contact them and ask them, tell them what you do, and or tell them what you do, and ask them if, in that case, would they be interested in receiving an application from you. You do know, and indicate that you do know that they don't accept unsolicited. So what you're asking is, they seem to be giving grants out. They seem to talk about applications maybe in their accounts. So obviously there's a process involved. How do you get involved in that process? You're asking about the process rather than the grants. You're not asking them to give you a grant. You're not submitting information to get the grant so that they consider it. You're asking, how do you get involved in the process of it? And focus on the process of applying for it rather than an actual application to it. If they have a website that they have, or they've got Twitter or X, or however they're calling themselves now, a fundraising, a Facebook site, a LinkedIn site, don't stalk the people who are on their team. If they say that they work there, don't necessarily send them an email, but go for the organizational site, interact with them on that side. Again, don't be asking them about funding yet. What you want to do is find out what they do, interact with any statements they put in, so they can start to see you. It may be as well that if they're asking for requests, or they're asking for information, then or wanting to interact with their audiences, then that's where you can do it. Become known to them that way. Another way to be known is send a letter of introduction. This is who we are. This is what we do. If you are interested, we would be more than happy to provide you with a funding request if that is appropriate for you. Put that ball in there to accept an application in their yard. If you send an application when they say clearly no unsolicited applications, it tells them that you don't listen to the guidelines, and you don't follow their requests, which means that if they give you funding, are you going to follow the instructions that you've been given and adhere to the terms and conditions of your grant award? If you can't do it for a simple thing like applying, then chances are you're probably not going to do it when you get the grant, and they may decide that that's too much of a risk and then just put you on their list of do not fund. You don't want to get on that list. Another question was from Mohammed Tawazir, I think I said that right. Tawahid, I hope I said that right. As a new charity with no accounts yet, what's the best approach to take? And there are funders who will fund when you don't have accounts yet. Some of them will say, if you don't have a full year, don't apply yet until you've had the full year of accounts. And they can help a little bit sometimes. Some won't accept you at all, and others might, but they'll ask for income and expenditure management accounts or to date, and also possibly a 12-month income expenditure projection for your next financial year. It's definitely worth checking with the organization you aim to apply to save wasting time. The other thing is, if you're doing your research, which you'll need to do if you don't have accounts yet, if you're going to be doing trust fundraising, you'll come across the ones that say, we don't give money to if you don't have accounts yet. Put those to the side. Don't delete them. Hold on to them. What you're going to want to do with that is make sure that you have that list. That's going to be a prospect list. It's going to be very, very helpful for you in the future, but you don't need it now. What you do want to do is there'll be ones that say, we accept, if you're a brand new charity, we accept funding applications from you. Contact them if they don't say anything at all, because they may say, sure, send us something. Awards for All and some of the lottery grant applications also do that kind of funding. When you are looking for grants and you don't have your 12 months expenditure yet. I would double check the Awards for All though, because they have changed their system slightly. They're giving slightly larger grants, and I think their processes might be changing a little bit as well. So double check that, but it is possible. Another question that was asked was by Ruth Greenberg, and she asked, what is the most common reasons for rejection? It's going to depend on the funder, to tell you the truth, and there's quite a number that will put out a list of what they fund, what they don't fund, and why often when they don't give, if they don't give you feedback as to why you weren't funded, why they will give you often a list of the general reasons why they don't fund. I would say first and foremost is that you've not followed the guidelines. And that could be you've not followed the guidelines because you're asking for something they don't fund. You're not following the instructions that they've given you to apply. Your application is longer or inappropriate to what the guidelines have said and what they've asked for, or you're missing information. And then finally, you've asked for too much funding. At the moment, generally, if you still fit all of that and you've done everything and you are still a good fit, it could just be that they're oversubscribed. In 2008, when there was a little bit of a drop and there were some problems after that and the olive green issues, a lot of charities switched from doing a lot of community work and a lot of direct mail into doing much higher volumes of trust fundraising because the trust fundraising targets increased. And funders who'd received 100 applications a year were now getting 500. Well, since then, with the COVID crisis and with the cost of living crisis, those organizations that have been receiving 500 to 600 applications a year have probably gone up to 1,000 or more a year. And so it's a volume of applications. Now, not all of those are eligible applications that are fit the guidelines and fit what they want to fund. However, a lot is to do with oversubscription. And so they may be able to fund 10 grants and they've got 200 applications that are valid and appropriate. They are going to think very carefully about where they're giving their funding and how they're giving their funding. It may also take an awful lot longer. So if you're waiting for a decision, keep in mind that often trustees, even on the big charities, often trustees and the people making the decisions are volunteers. They're doing the work to decide which applications are successful and not after they've delivered a full-time job. So be patient. Understand that while you need money, they have to give the money out, but they also have responsibilities themselves and boxes they have to go through and guidelines they have to deliver. The other one that I've been seeing lately is project planning. And project planning, your application be great, your ask can be on target, your organization and cause can be on target. the way you're going to go about delivering the application and delivering the project is really messy and not conclusive. So your organization's delivery plans, not the application, this has nothing to do with the trust itself and the trust application itself and the fundraising. This has everything to do with the project itself. Make sure that makes sense and is really, really common sense and logical, and that you're hitting all the points that you need to hit. And that if someone else wanted to deliver it, or if your team left, there's enough information to go in and someone else could deliver it and it would still be a good quality project. It's worth, as we said, it's worth applying without accounts and with applying to standardized emails for the unsolicited. Make sure that you are being really clear about how you're applying. Excuse me while I get the papers together. Where do you find trust to apply to, especially when you have no money? Well, the easiest and simplest place is the regulatory body for each country in the UK or in other countries. So in Scotland, England, and Northern Ireland, that is OSCAR, the Office of the Scottish Charity Regulator, which is free to access. In England, it is the Charity Commission, and in Northern Ireland, it's Charity Commission for Northern Ireland. England and Wales are both in the Charity Commission. In other countries, it will depend on your country itself. If you don't have the subscription for that and you can't get it, there are some low-cost ones out there. And if you do a search on Trust Fundraising Hub, you'll find various lists of trust fundraising subscription databases that have, and the suggestions of why they're a good one or why people find them good. The Charity Commission lists and the lists, if you download them or do a search, can be longer, which is why the database, which means that while you're not paying for a subscription to access those lists, you are, which have been gone through, you're doing the work yourself. So if it's constantly taking you 10 or 11 days to narrow down a Charity Commission search, and which works out to say a couple £100 or £1,000 to your organization's worth of time that you could have been spending doing something else that is on your list of things to do, it may be cost effective for them to provide you with a database subscription. And I think that's a cost benefit exercise you have to deliver. But to do it, you still have to do at least one application or one search to find out what it is. You will get a lot of hits that aren't necessary. It's going through the advanced search. If you have less than 10,000 in a search, you can download it. If you're looking under a number of keywords because your area is not you can't put in too many qualifiers, I would say do those lists, amalgamate. You can download them. They get downloaded as a CSV file. Save that as an Excel file. It looks like an Excel file when you open it up, but you have to save it as Excel. Otherwise, it doesn't. When you open it again, it can go a little bit wonky. When you have them as Excel files, put them all into one workbook as different worksheets. Then put all the worksheets together into one master, and then do in the Excel database section, in the data list, in the data section on your top menu, you will have an option to remove duplicates. If you do, take a look at the pop-up window. I've just done this with myself, and I've just done this with one of my associates. Take a look at the pop-up window. The pop-up window comes up with all the different links that are, columns that you can compare on. One of those columns is and then it's got two options: select all, unselect all. I would click unselect all and then go in and click the individuals, because when the box opens up the first time, everything is checked. My suggestion is do it either on charity number or charity name. Charity name, though, there are some charities that have this. It's the same named charity, two different charity numbers, and they're not a charity that has changed from one form to another and therefore has a new charity number. So my suggestion is be really clear about that. You can narrow it down a lot. If you are going to one of the free services that's out there, which sometimes it's resources, sometimes it's databases. They do ask you often a lot of questions before you can access their database. And sometimes a lot of those questions have really nothing to do with your research of the funders and have everything to do with corporate information about your organization. Your managers may not want you giving that information out to anyone who isn't a funder. So double check if a database or a resource is doing that, they're data mining and they are getting your information for free. So just be careful of that. It's part of your due diligence. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying it's part of your due diligence to accept and understand what the risk is of doing that. The other thing is a good resource will have categorization and sorting options, and it's going to be up to date. You want to make sure that the information's up to date, and you want to know how they've been gathering that information, and that's how you can choose. The other thing is some of those too good to be true lists that say there's lots of shortcuts they take a lot more time, or you then have to go in and do a whole lot more extra research on them. What I will say is one of the resources I've recently looked at had an awful lot of out-of-date information for a major cause sector where I would have expected they had a couple hundred, and they should have had thousands, and they had a couple hundred, and those couple hundred were quite specific to certain geographies rather than across the board. And on top of that, the information on them was out of date. So you just want to make sure that you're getting good information. And on that note, we're a little bit over time, so I hope that you have had some good information today and that I've been able to give you some pointers and some tips that will help you. Just to remind you again, our next Q&A live is on Thursday the 15th of February at 12:15. We're now doing Q&A lives quarterly. I also want to remind you that we do have a trust webinar next week on creating a trust fundraising strategy, and that's called Beyond the Roadmap, Developing Successful Trust Fundraising Strategies. If you need to find out more or are looking to go and find tickets for it, they can be found on the Money Tree Fundraising website, or you can always message me through Trust Fundraising Hub and I can get back to you with more information. I hope you have a good afternoon and see you in February or next Tuesday.